Is that
Okay.
okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Hare Krishna.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Sharakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Darati Swaha Patantikam Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyat Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadha Shiva Shari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So it's a pleasure to be electronically situated in San Diego at the lotus feet of Shri Radhagiri Dari, one of some of the most elegant, beautiful deities in the movement. All deities are beautiful, but some deities are especially beautiful. So today I will read one passage, famous verse from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and and then we'll discuss a little bit in terms of those who illustrate the principles uh, that uh, are elucidated in this verse. So this is first canto, second chapter, text number 10. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll read the verse and then the translation and purport, which is a very interesting uh, point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport. Especially interesting. Kamasya nandriya priti labho jivata yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yaschatta karma bhi. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So uh, this particular verse, many of us would feel that uh, right away from the very beginning, the Bhagavatam is sending us against the current of modern society where everything is directed towards sense gratification. I was making the point in a few classes that it's very amazing that someone who can kick a ball around or throw it around or bounce it around in an elegant way is paid millions and millions of dollars. But someone who educates others, even mundane education, maybe gets 40,000 a year, 50,000, California, a little more because everything's more expensive. And, uh, and a spiritual teacher, if he's really giving spiritual truth as our Param Guru or Param Guru, Pati Param Guru for many, uh, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, just speak the truth. Don't worry about money. Krishna is the husband of the goddess of fortune. Money will come. Of course, that's more easily said than done, but it's very interesting that this verse is telling us. But what is it telling us? One should desire a healthy life. So Srila Prabhupada in different presentations or different classes, He said healthy life means a comfortable life. And a comfortable life, otherwise there's nothing against comfort. Arjuna had comfort, Yudhishthira had comfort. But when Krishna dictated that there would be no comfort, otherwise being uh, exiled to the forest, then there was no comfort. But it made no dent on their Krishna consciousness. It just was accepted as the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Oh, we can discuss that, but so it's very amazing that Srila Prabhupada had nothing against a comfortable life, although as long as that comfort provides a better opportunity to serve Krishna. So that should be the determining factor. How much pleasure, how much sense gratification do we need? Well, that's just as much to live a healthy life and a comfortable life, and as much comfort as we need to increase our service. When looking for comfort or striving for comfort becomes lessens our service, then it becomes Maya. Even Srila Prabhupada needed a certain degree of comfort. He needed silence. One devotee, one god brother of mine, he said when he was in London with Srila Prabhupada, he wasn't a very prominent devotee at that time, so probably still isn't. And so he decided that let me go outside Prabhupada's room and chant japa outside on the outside in the lawn, and there Prabhupada will see that I'm really fixed in my devotional service. So he was there chanting. After about 1.5 minutes, he said, Prabhupada opened the window, and Prabhupada said, "Oh, there's so many places to chant. No, we have such a big property here. You can find so many places to chant." Close the window. So he didn't exactly, no one ever exactly got what they expected to get from Srila Prabhupada. But because Prabhupada, as scriptures say, you can never understand the nature of a pure devotee, and what to speak of someone on the level of Srila Prabhupada. So I'll read the purport. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed toward the fulfillment of desires and sense gratification. Such a civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion or even salvation, the very tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. Just on this particular note, I guess it was around 1985, when mega churches were just starting to blossom in the US, these big, stadium-like churches. So there was one very famous one in Dallas, which had seating for 20,000 people. So one devotee and myself, we decided to go see what is their secret, what do they say in such a, so that, maybe we can employ some techniques. So we went, we sat in the very back so we could escape if need be. And it was good that we did. So then the preacher came on stage, just like, almost like an entertainer walking out, everybody clapping with his microphone. And then he turned toward this big curtain on the back wall, which is a huge back wall. And the curtain opened, there was a big American flag. And so he said, "This, folks, is the real meaning of what we're doing here. God bless America. America is prosperous because God has blessed it, and because we have dedicated our lives to God." And so we immediately got up and left. But so just what Srila Prabhupada is saying here, even religion, salvation, people want sense gratification. The voters adore so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. And as soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense gratification, they dethrone the leaders. Just like here in the here in the U.S., I've spoken to many people because they ask me, about my life and where I explain I travel quite a bit, and people always think traveling is nice, except those that have to travel. And so, one person we were speaking about, different countries, and I mentioned a few of the countries that I visit, which are basically third world countries and not so great economies. Many of them are suffering. People suffer for want of money, and so uh, this particular person said, "Yes, it's too bad. It's too bad. We're so fortunate here." So I said, "Yes, we're fortunate because instead of distributing the resources so that others can live better, we have a tendency to exploit others so that we can live very comfortably at their cost." So that didn't go over very well with that person, but it's what Srila Prabhupada is saying here. Otherwise, everyone is so addicted to sense gratification, they don't care about thousands or hundreds of thousands of Chinese people working in factories to produce ridiculously cheap items so that we can try to enjoy them. No, people don't think about that. But Srila Prabhupada is making it very apparent here. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. And of course, Srila Prabhupada said, what are the problems of life? Birth, death, old age, and disease. Every other problem is a temporary, temporary uh, problem that will be solved at the very least at the time of death, if not sooner. It will just become, no, it has to disappear at some point in time. But these problems keep plaguing us again and again. So even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with the absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. What is that spiritual suicide? And what is that sense gratification? I'm in control. I'm the supreme. I'm God. It's very interesting if, for an exercise, one can read the verse 4 in Bhagavad Gita 4:10, the purport, beautiful purport, where Srila Prabhupada explains Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, that we can conquer over attachment, anger, and fear. And Srila Prabhupada explains that how one progressively goes through those three, and after one becomes very angry and frustrated, then thinks, well, if everything else didn't work out, let me become God. Otherwise, let me try to make money, let me try to be happy, uh, with family, friends, the opposite sex, whatever. And when everything else doesn't work, then let me become one with God. So sense gratification, even salvation becomes sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses. I'm sorry, one should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation, not for sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction. There are regulative directions for the satisfaction of the senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. And of course, the classic example of that is eating. If you eat the right amount and the right things, then you're happy, you're healthy, you're full of energy in most cases, unless we have some karma looming over us that won't allow us to be healthy no matter what. But generally speaking, but if you eat too much, you get sick, you may gain unnecessary weight, and all kinds of problems, and wasting, People are so desirous of enjoying their eating and their different sense activities that they waste. For example, marriage or the combination of a man with a woman is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense gratification. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning. But foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. So I found this particular statement to be very, very wonderful, very revolutionary statement of Srila Prabhupada. The outside society is always trying to figure out, just like every time I go to a big city, there's always like 2 or 3 freeways. They're under construction. They're putting in another lane. You know. Why? Because the suburbs have extended out and there's too much traffic. So they put another lane. But as soon as they put another lane, they put another suburb a little farther out, and it goes back to the same situation. So the same thing, family planning, or whatever. People, instead of searching after the absolute truth, just like in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, in a little farther along in the 5th chapter, it says, Tasyaiva hetu prayatitta vido na labhyate tad brahmatamu paryada. That one should search, an intelligent person, Kovida, should search for that which is beyond the something that cannot be obtained in this world. Because everything else, you go from Brahmaloka to the smallest insect, you go from the highest realm of the universe to the lowest. And what will you find? Talabhyate dukavad anyata sukham. You will find happiness and distress proportioned in such a way that it cannot be changed. Kalena sarvatra gabira ramhasa. That, and you will get, in due course of time, you'll get the happiness or the distress that is allotted to you for your previous activities. And then now in this life, you're contributing some more, but most of that will probably become manifest in the future, not right away, because we've already got so much karma baggage from the past. How many lifetimes, how many instances have we been in where we've created a situation that causes us to become more and more and more situated in entangled. Even good works, even that which makes us happy materially, or trying to help others, or helping an elderly lady across the street, or doing some good deed, it's also karma. It ties us to this material world. It obliges us to someone we helped. Now they have to help us. So the best thing to do is to serve Krishna. And this is what Srila Prabhupada, of course, is recommending here, that we, if we actually restrain ourselves, and not restraint, not a forced restraint, but a restraint that is achieved by displacement, displacing. This displacement principle is spoken about in Bhagavad Gita, param drishtva nivartate. Displacing, getting some greater pleasure. And then, we've all experienced this. Children, they have a toy, like a 2-year-old has a certain toy. You try to take it away from them, you can only imagine. Of course, those of you who have children can understand what that means. But then when there's a new toy, a better toy, or a new bicycle, or after that a car or whatever, then very easy to give up. So this is the principle given by Krishna, displacement, or technically speaking, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe, that we achieve detachment from unnecessary things, or things that are obstacles in our spiritual advancement, by becoming more attached to Krishna. We want to see beauty. Everybody wants to see beauty, go on a trip. In California, you can drive into the mountains, very beautiful, some lakes, some rivers, the ocean. We can go to another country, see the seven wonders of the world. But what is that compared to the beauty of Krishna? When Srila Prabhupada was walking once in Los Angeles, one devotee said to Prabhupada, yes, the sunset is very beautiful. And Prabhupada just said no. And devotee, but Prabhupada, it's coming from Krishna. So Krishna is the most beautiful. Can't we appreciate that beauty? Prabhupada said, you were not seeing it coming from Krishna. Otherwise, Prabhupada could see that he was just expressing, the beauty. Well, there's nothing wrong with expressing the beauty, but Prabhupada wanted the devotees to really become Krishna conscious and see everything as coming from Krishna. So searching for the absolute truth, as Srila Prabhupada says here, searching for the absolute truth, the real purpose of life. Just like in the past, when I did Sankirtan, and whenever I do it, generally speaking, I like to say, I introduce myself, and then I generally say, what is your goal in life? And I find people just become flabbergasted. They can't answer. They have to really think about it. Well, make some money, take care of my family. And then I always say, well, what beyond and above that? And people are bewildered. Their goal is 30 years of security in this world. Let me fix my payments over the next 20, 30 years so I can be comfortable. And we know that never works out. So Srila Prabhupada says, just continuing to the end of the purport, seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. Otherwise, Krishna is so great, so wonderful. This Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses, each of which, not each, but many of which, not every verse could be spoken about for 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but many, many, many verses could be spoken about for unlimited amounts of time. And so a devotee is overwhelmed. That means if we're serious in our Krishna consciousness, we're overwhelmed by researching this absolute truth. And this is nothing unusual. What is science doing? Scientists are looking for the truth. They're looking for first they were looking for the God particle. I remember one article came out a few years ago. It was about research. I think it was in Switzerland. They have a super accelerator there. So they were looking for the God particle, and they said, we found it. But then all of a sudden they said, no, otherwise it went out of the reactor, and they said it crossed through France and went somewhere into England. So they couldn't contain the God particle. And now there's a new thing I just saw the other day. I can't remember the name of it, certain type of chromosome. This chromosome will give us immortality. That's a way to attract someone to your article. But then they said, yes, this can actually help the aging process. Although, and there's the although or the but that butts us. And it says, but, or although, it has had some adverse effects in mice, but we're sure that we can, and also, if you use it in one way, it can cure cancer, but that can also cause your life to get shortened. But if you use it for increasing your life, the downside may be that if you have any tendency toward cancer, it will become accelerated. But we'll work it out. And so this is the promise. So In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth, and that sort of engagement will make one happy because he will be less engaged in the varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute is explained as follows, which we won't get into right now. So the previous verse said, Dharmasya yapavargyasya, that Dharma, or our real duty in life, our real activity, our real nature is apavargyasya, is just what it says here. Instead of engaging in varieties of sense gratification, engage in varieties of spiritual satisfaction. This is what the Bhagavatam offers us. I was just having an interchange with someone about this very point, the varieties of sense gratification and the varieties of spiritual enlightenment. So, which has more variety? And going back to many of Srila Prabhupada's classical examples, every species of life is doing the same thing: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Of course, in some species, they're so single cell organisms, their mating, or their is basically dividing. They divide themselves, but then they eat another particle. They rest for a while, and they have birth, death, old age, and disease. Their old age is very different from ours, but the point is that the varieties are just like different spices, just like you can have broccoli with turmeric, broccoli with cumin, broccoli by itself, broccoli with salt, broccoli with lemon, but it's still broccoli. So we can have these four things: birth, death, old age, and disease, or eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and we can add little spices to it. Srila Prabhupada's classic example: a dog running on four legs, a person running on four wheels. So it's a little more sophisticated. But that sophistication also, which we pride ourselves on, our sophisticated four-wheel transportation instead of four legs. But those who are on four legs, when they're tired, they just lay down, go to sleep. When they're hungry, they just go find something to eat. And we have to make so much more endeavor to pay for the four wheels, to go and find different varieties of sense gratification in different places, and pay for the gasoline or the electricity or whatever type of energy we're using. And we think, well, we'll solve all these problems. We'll just have sustainable energy. By that way, we'll lessen the greenhouse effect. And by more recycling, we can exploit the earth less. But Srila Prabhupada said the age-old yet revolutionary statement: if you just search for the absolute truth, family planning, ecology, environmental concerns, energy concerns, all of them will be addressed immediately. All of them will be solved. But of course, that requires some training, because everything is a question of training. And people think, well, what will I do? So I wanted to refer to a couple of personalities who appear. One of them, his disappearance celebration is just 2 days from now, Sri Ishwara Puri. Sri Ishwara Puri was a very, very special personality because he was the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, this month, we're leading up to the Gaur Purnima, or the celebration of the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Ishwara Puri, he was so renounced. And these people, these renunciants, they're not artificial renunciants. One time, Srila Prabhupada was coming back from his morning walk in Los Angeles, and when he would come back, it was customary that he and those select persons who could accompany him would get some Mahaprasadam at the door. So Prabhupada took his Mahaprasadam, and one devotee asked him, Srila Prabhupada, Mahaprasadam is so purifying, so wonderful. Why is it that the six Goswamis did not take, why would they not take more Mahaprasadam? Why did they eat so simply, especially Raghunath Das, who would just eat a little bit of broken rice? Why wouldn't they just take some nice Mahaprasadam? And Srila Prabhupada turned and smiled. And he said, well, they're eating with Krishna. Now one may think, well, that's, yeah, I could think like that, but they weren't thinking like that. They were living like that. Their reality is their eternal relationship with Krishna. Just like any family person, their reality is being at home with the family. But they have to go out and work and deal with situations in the world. So the six Goswamis, their reality was being with Krishna, seeing Krishna's pastimes manifesting before them, taking great pleasure in hearing and chanting about Krishna and showing people how to worship Krishna properly. So they were so absorbed in Krishna. Even Raghunath Das Goswami, the most renounced, externally renounced, he one time he had an upset stomach and he couldn't figure out what it was. So his assistant went and called an Ayurvedic doctor. Ayurvedic doctor came and he examined him, felt his pulse, said, your problem is indigestion. And his assistant said, indigestion? How could he have indigestion? He eats 2 palmfuls of food every day. How could he possibly have indigestion? And the Kaviraj, the doctor, said, no, I'm expert. It clearly indicates indigestion. So the assistant was arguing, and Raghunath Das said, well, I have to admit that last night I dreamed that Krishna, Srimati Radharani, served this wonderful, beautiful plate of things that she had just cooked for Krishna. And Krishna's remnants were all offered to me, and I ate the whole plate. So he was even experiencing indigestion. His dedication was so great that he was experiencing internally this indigestion. So these great personalities, they're so renounced, but they're not, in one sense, they're not renounced. In the sense that, yes, externally speaking, they're very renounced. But that renunciation is not dry renunciation. Sometimes, because what is the problem if we try to be renounced? If we just try to be renounced, just by giving things up artificially, what will happen? One of two things. I remember one devotee, I won't say his name to not embarrass him. Probably none of you know him anyway, but he was with me in Panama. So he would say, let's fast. Okay, I like fasting. So we would fast 1, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. But after the fast, he would go to the supermarket and buy peanut butter and this kind of spread and this kind of sweet and condensed milk and boil it until it turned into a caramel and this and that. And then he would just be laying on his back for hours with indigestion. So that's one thing that happens when we artificially renounce. But even more dangerous, if one artificially renounces, then one can become proud of one's renunciation. Just see, I'm a renunciant. Just like sometimes we can feel like I'm very proud of how humble I am. So these are contradictory situations. So Sri Ishwara Puri was so renounced that he would even hide his identity. He was so advanced when he went to meet his godbrother Sri Advaita Acharya. He arrived at his house and he was dressed as a Mayavad, as a impersonalist renunciate, an impersonalist sannyasi. But Sri Advaita Acharya could see his effulgence, could see his smile, could see that he was full of Krishna bhakti. And so immediately he detected that he was a devotee. And of course, they began to discuss Krishna and had a very wonderful time. And so Ishwara Puri, he met, then he stayed in Navadvip for some time. He met Gadadhar Pandit, and he was teaching him from his book, Sri Krishna Vijay. And then he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And immediately, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered obeisances, and being a grihastha, and he was showing the proper etiquette, although certainly everyone offers obeisances to him. And they spent time together. And then Ishwara Puri said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, if you're such you're Nimai Pandit, you're a great scholar. Could you please review my book and correct it? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, anyone who tries to correct the book of someone as great as you, Puripad, someone who's so exalted, is simply an offender, not understanding that whatever comes from the lotus mouth, or the lotus pen in this case, of a great Vaishnava, that is perfect in itself because it only deals with glorification of Krishna. Well, then a few days later, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, well, there is one thing. This verb, you express this verb in this particular way, but it should be in another tense. And so Ishwara Puri humbly accepted it. But then a day later or a couple of days later, he said, actually, I've decided that my way of doing it was best. Now, why did he do that? Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted him to. Otherwise, he had simply accepted. Even though he was, by material calculation, much more elevated personality than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, than Nimai Pandit. Externally speaking, in society, he was a renunciant. And especially at that time, renunciants in India, still renunciants are very much honored, but at that time they were honored even more. But by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's arrangement, he said, no, I'll stick with the form that I use. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because this is his devotee, the devotee is so exalted in the mind of Krishna and the mind of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he didn't correct anything else, even though there were other grammatical mistakes, but he didn't correct anything else. So the point is that this Ishwara Puri was in total ecstasy by being with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then later on, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, on the pretext of going to Gaya and doing the Pinda ceremony for his father, he went, he offered obeisances to the lotus feet of Gadadhar or Vishnu. He heard the Brahmins chanting, but then he saw Sri Ishwara Puri, and he came and said, now the real purpose of my coming here has been achieved. Because the real purpose is Janesh Vabigeshu Swa Eva Gokara. In the Bhagavatam, it says that if one doesn't come to a holy place to meet saintly persons, then one's mentality is no better than a cow or an ass. Just like we go to Mayapur, Vrindavan, holy places, we see donkeys. Of course, they're very elevated donkeys, but we see cows. But what are they doing? Eating, sleeping. So if one goes to a holy place and just eats and sleeps or invents one's own process of being there, then we're no better than the four-legged residents of those places. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then one day in his residence, he was cooking. Ishwara Puri came. He immediately gave everything to Ishwara Puri. And then a day later, he came and he saw Ishwara Puri. He said, actually, the purpose of my coming here on the pretext of doing pinda for my father was just to meet a great elevated personality like you. Because that's the real purpose of life. Because only someone like you can take me beyond the desires to enjoy this material world. That please become my spiritual master. And Ishwara Puri said, you are the supreme person. So how can I be your spiritual master when you are the spiritual master of the universe? But because you want me to do it, then I will do it. So this is real renunciation. Real renunciation means accepting the desire of the Lord. And usually the Lord's desire puts us in a more pleasurable circumstance. Because spiritually speaking, if we get this opportunity, as Rupa Goswami said, what are we doing in this world? Kamadinam katina katida palita durni desha tesham jatamai nakaruna nakaruna natrapa nopashanti. What are we doing in this world? We become slaves to our senses, durni desha, and those senses are giving us so much disturbance. And even though we're serving them so faithfully, nakaruna, they have no mercy, natrapa, they don't leave us alone, and no pashanti, and they never really satisfy our desires. So then Rupa Goswami said, this is my dilemma. I'm serving these merciless and 24 hours a day, 24/7. The senses are working 24/7. Even when we're sleeping, they're demanding so many things. So but he said, Utsrijai tan attayadupati sampatam labdha buddhis. But now I met this wonderful person, Yadupati Krishna, and my intelligence has awakened. So Tvam ayata sharanam abhayam mam niyukshvatma dasye. Now I'm free from all fear of the anxiety, because fear, of course, in Sanskrit, fear is bhayam, but bhayam can also mean just anxiety. So now I've become free from anxiety by taking shelter of your lotus feet and becoming your servant. Now all my distresses, everything is gone. So this is the result. And Srila Prabhupada, he didn't encourage us to just give up. Renunciation doesn't mean give up, because Prabhupada said, actually, we don't have anything, so what can we give up? Real renunciation means give up the idea that I even have something. But renunciation means to understand everything belongs to Krishna and live in that consciousness. It's not a problem that you have a car or two cars or three cars or a big house or a little house or no house or three houses. But use all of those things for Krishna. That's real renunciation. Just like a king needs a palace, and a renounced Brahmin needs a little space, just like the famous Sudam Brahmin. He he went to see Krishna on the plea of his wife to go see your friend Krishna. He has so much opulence. So he went not so much to get the opulence, but feeling that I need to serve my wife. She's not happy. So let me go and I'll be able to see Krishna. And then Krishna spoke to him. They had a wonderful time together. On his way back, he was thinking, actually, Krishna, I gave him some broken rice that I had taken for him. He was so grateful, but he didn't give me anything. Krishna is so wonderful because he knows that I would probably become bewildered if he gave me anything. So he was very happy, but when he arrived home, there was no hut anymore. There was a beautiful palace and gardens and buildings. And he walked up the stairs, and he saw this beautiful woman like the goddess of fortune. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I'm your wife." Of course, his wife previously was, her 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 cheeks were sunken from hunger and her body wrinkled up. Now she looked like beautiful. And then he transformed into a beautiful person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have recognized him. They would have passed each other. But then he went into that big palace and he lay down on the ground. All he required was the same 6 feet by 3 feet space. And otherwise, everything was for Krishna. So Krishna gave him a palace or Krishna gave him a hut. It was the same for him. And this is renunciation. Renunciation means really accepting whatever Krishna gives us and trying to use it properly. And the more that we live like that, the more that Krishna will want to give us. Unless Krishna is trying to teach others through our example, like he did with Arjuna, then there may be some difficult times. But ultimately, Krishna wants all of his devotees to be happy. Actually, when the demigod in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, it says that, I can't remember the verse right now, but Satyam Dishat Yatito Artitan Rinam, that the Lord is very desirous, the demigods are saying, the Lord is very desirous of giving anyone what they desire. But if he perceives that they will use it improperly and it will lead them into more entanglement in this material world, what does he do? Because they're worshiping him, he gives them his lotus feet on their head, even though that's not what they aspired for. And that will give them more satisfaction than anything else. So this is Krishna's program. Because everything we have and all of the objects of sense gratification, they require so much effort. The great devotee, Sri Prahlad Maharaj, he said that dukaushadam tadapi dukam, that the difficulty you have to go through to try to eliminate suffering many times is greater than the suffering itself. Otherwise, the effort we have to put into creating what we would conceive of as a non-suffering condition usually requires more effort than just accepting what comes naturally. But whether you make that effort or not, at least offer it to Krishna. Find the way to offer it to Krishna. Find the way to have the consciousness to offer to Krishna. Just like this great devotee, Sri Ishwara Puri. By his devotion, what happened to him? He became the spiritual master of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One time Srila Prabhupada said, the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, they're very foolish because they want to become one with God. But the devotee of the Lord, he becomes greater than God. Of course, that's not a devotee's desire, but that's what will happen. Krishna wants his devotee to take a position where Krishna becomes subordinate. Krishna loves that. That's what Krishna loves to do. But when we try to do that by making Krishna our order supplier, then the opposite happens. But when we really try to make Krishna the object of our love, of our devotion, of our work, of our activities. Bhuktaram Jagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. We understand He's the owner of everything. He's the goal of everything. He's my best friend. How can we go wrong? One time a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, I was thinking about studying law. That way I can, we need legal help sometimes in the movement. Prabhupada said, why should you study law? You should simply preach to the lawyers. Of course, sometimes devotees do study law and then they become successful lawyers and help. But that was Prabhupada. So Prabhupada gave the example. He said, just like Krishna, you can work so hard to become opulent, or you can understand Krishna, the supremely opulent person, is your best friend, and therefore you have immediate access to all opulence. Prabhupada said, better to have a rich best friend than to strive to become rich, because as soon as you have a rich best friend, you have access to all that opulence. Of course, sometimes Krishna may not give all the opulence right away because it might be detrimental to our spiritual advance. Another great renunciant, Srimad-Bhagavatam Puri. I'm just going to give one example because we're coming toward the end of our time. He was so renounced that he walked for days and days and days, and 3 days he was fasting. And when he arrived in Govardhan, in Vrindavan, and he was sitting down, he was like very, meditating on Krishna, chanting the holy name. And just because of so much fasting and walking, he was in a meditative state, and he saw this young boy come and offered him milk. He said, no, I'm fasting. And that was Krishna. And he said, no one fasts in my village. And so he gave him the milk, and he said, I'll come back later for the pot. He took the milk, and because if you haven't eaten for 3 days, if you take some milk, then you feel a little drowsy. So he dozed off for a few minutes, and he saw that this is Krishna. And Krishna told him, please go to the bushes. I'm there in my deity form. Take me out and put me on the top of Govardhan Hill and worship me. So he wanted to be renounced, but Krishna turned his renunciation into a wonderful festival. And of course, it's not that he gave up his renunciation, but that's the way Krishna works. When he sees his devotee is surrendered to him, then he gives that devotee the most important thing: transcendental bliss, spiritual happiness, spiritual satisfaction. So whether that takes material opulence to bring that out, or whether it takes, whether Krishna decides to limit us this way or that way, the result will be the same if we simply accept the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is what is saying here. I just wanted to conclude by saying that the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the story of Kurma Brahman, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Kurma Brahman, you stay in your home with your family and you preach Krishna consciousness, and others will benefit from that. Don't try to come and travel with me, but accept your position and be Krishna conscious. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport where that instruction is given, Charidakatarikaha Krishna Padesha Maragyaya Guru Hanyatare Desh. Just become a guru by living in where you live and preaching Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada says, there is no need for taking sannyas. Everyone can live comfortably in their home and chant the holy name of Krishna. Of course, if we chant the holy name of Krishna, then and feel some pleasure from it, we will want to give it to others. And who will we want to give it to? That depends on our vision. Like generally speaking, we want to share something very wonderful with our family members, with our friends. But when we understand that everyone is Krishna's family, Sarva Samashu Bhuteshu, all living entities are part and parcel of Krishna, and we should see them in the same way, then we'll want to give this holy name and this Krishna consciousness to everyone. So this is what's being recommended here. Jivasya tattva jigyasya. The real purpose of life is tattva jigyasa, to understand the absolute truth, and therefore we should accept just as much sense gratification as we need to be healthy and physically healthy and happy to be able to serve Krishna in a very wonderful way. So I don't know if I should leave a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay. Are there any questions? Someone can raise their hand, their electronic hand, or speak out, or those that are viewing on Zoom.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking you were talking about renunciation. I was just wondering if you could comment on, because like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there's that verse that says that he came to teach renunciation and devotion to himself.
Mm-hmm.
So whether one's a sannyasi or brahmachari or whatever position they're in, that renunciation is important. So I was wondering if you could comment on that the idea of the importance of say having friendship in Krishna consciousness to help, you could say, maintain our spiritual position or our renunciation in Krishna consciousness. Because if we don't have friends, then I don't know if does that make sense.
let me wade through that one. That's a little convoluted, but I think I understand. So,
Okay.
First of all, what did Srila Prabhupada say about renunciation? One devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, what should we renounce? What should we give up? And what should be our austerity? And Prabhupada said, your austerity is to chant Hare Krishna. And then Prabhupada said, but Prabhupada, but beyond that, Prabhupada said, chant more. So this is our real austerity. As long as it remains in austerity. Once it is not in austerity, once it's actually the greatest pleasure in our life, the chanting of the holy name, that opens the door to so much friendship. Now, speaking of friendship and renunciation, it's very important because the first principle, there were the five last principles of devotional qualities or devotional activities, 64. The five last ones began with sadhu sangha, association or friendship with devotees. So when we have friendship with devotees, then it's more easier to chant the holy name. When we have friendship with devotees, it's easier and more palatable to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam. When we have friendship with devotees, we're automatically residing in a holy place. And when we have friendship with devotees, then we will see and worship deities constantly. So that friendship with devotees and dedication to devotional service brings us to gives us that higher pleasure and is actually becomes a source of renunciation, which is what I tried to emphasize in the class, that real renunciation means displacement. Otherwise, instead of becoming attracted to so many things in this world, when we have friendship with those who are not attracted to all the things in this world, then that friendship is so powerful. As the Bhagavatam says, Tuliyama lavanapi naswargam napumar bhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya, that when we associate with someone and we have friendship with someone who's very pure, then even a slight amount of association takes us beyond heavenly desires or desires for heavenly pleasures or even liberation. So yes, that friendship is very important. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Yeah, we have one here.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you for being with us tonight. It's really nice. My question is regarding some of the points that you were making. I mean, it's around the verse, the idea of sense gratification and keeping your eyes on the goal or the absolute truth. Throughout the lecture, you mentioned the idea of making money, and it seemed that sometimes it was favorable to make money, and other times it was seen as not favorable, or even the means of making money. So sometimes I think this is sometimes confusing for younger devotees as far as making money seen as bad or good, or is it just simply losing sight of the goal and losing sight of the absolute truth that we should be a little bit more leery of than the actual ambition of making money to support one's family, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. I tried to make the point that making money is, I'm just going to read something I just looked up while you were asking the question. One who is in Krishna consciousness should not give up earning money out of fear that he is performing fruitive activity. If by working one can engage his money in Krishna consciousness, or if by rising early in the morning one can advance his transcendental Krishna consciousness, one should not desist out of fear or because such activities are considered troublesome. So that's from Bhagavad Gita 18:8. So we don't discourage anyone from anything. We try to encourage them. If you want to make money, then let's then try to use it all in Krishna's service, or as much as possible. And that is the principle of renunciation, because Krishna is speaking about renunciation. But Srila Prabhupada makes the point that renunciation in the mode of passion, otherwise renouncing because something is too difficult, being a brahmachari because family life seems too difficult, although I have an attraction for that association, but I don't want the difficulty. That's improper renunciation.
Yes, thank you for that, Maharaj. Thank you for that clarification. Beautiful.
Any other questions? Okay. There might be a question coming here. Oh. No. Someone just joined us, but I don't think she heard the class. I thought she was making a question, but I think it's just connecting.
Yeah, Zoom, I see there are 10 people. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the wonderful class, Jai Srila Prabhupada. I have one question. When you mentioned, Maharaj, that when we go to the Dham, we have to find some association or some kind of, we have to hear from authority or some kind of sadhu sangha or something. Sometimes we don't have in every Dham, it's hard to find association or something. My question is, if we chant and we just visit holy Dham, do snan in Ganga or something, so is that okay, or we have to find some
Well,
sangha?
I can relate to you an experience that I had, 1976, when we were in Vrindavan. One day we went to class, and I was a little sick, but there were very few devotees in the class. And Srila Prabhupada asked, where are the devotees? And one of the leaders said, well, many people went on different parikrams, and Prabhupada said, I have made this temple so that you can come and hear. And so, and Prabhupada just had a stern look on his face. And then he went on with the class. He started the class. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go and search out one particular personality, but our main activity should be hearing and chanting. So that's the point. And for hearing, if you want to hear properly, the best thing to do is to try to, in our temple, we have classes every day. So whether you're in Mayapur, Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri, or, there's like, I think almost 300, and so I can't remember how many temples there are in India, but practically speaking, any major town, there's an ISKCON temple where you can hear. So that's what it means. Doesn't mean that you have to search out an Ishwara Puri or a Mahaprabhu, but just find someone that you can hear from, and just go there with the idea of hearing. So that's the point.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Anyone else?
I have one question, Maharaj. How do we improve our chanting?
How do we improve our chanting? Well, there's many ways. One of them, one of the best ways is to hear what we're chanting, and really concentrate on hearing the chanting. And that's what Srila Prabhupada recommends more than anything else I ever saw him recommend. Of course, one thing that I recommend, and generally, is that the last thing we do in our daily activities is to hear about Krishna. This used to be like the program in all of our temples. We would all sit down, have a cup of milk and maybe a cupcake or something at around 8:15 or so, and we would hear for 45 minutes, or different places, different times, but we would hear Krishna book and immediately take rest. And the result is, the last thing you hear about is the first thing that your mind will focus on. So the more we hear about Krishna, if we make a vow to hear about Krishna at night, then in the morning when we wake up, that's what we want to do. We'll want to chant his holy name. We want to glorify Krishna. But if the last thing we do is Facebook or business or a TV or something else, then our mind will be attracted to sense gratification or some issue, and that will be dwelling in the mind, and therefore our focus will be interrupted. So that's called sankalpa. Sankalpa means we make a wish, especially at night. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that at night one should think, what did I do for Krishna? What did I do for Maya? So let me do more for Krishna, less for Maya. So if we do this sankalpa and we hear about Krishna with the desire to wake up and chant very fervently, then that helps a lot. I found that helps a lot.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And of course, one thing that Prabhupada always recommended also was that you start early. Start chanting very early, and it makes it much better quality. Yes, someone else was going to ask a question.
Yeah, Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question with the point you mentioned that if we are helping a old lady trying to cross the road, that also is going to bind us in karma, and we have to come back to get the result of that. So my question is that we see a lot of people in need of help. So we are still supposed to help them, right, Maharaj? If we can do something to help to alleviate their pain.
Yes, our Krishna consciousness means helping people. A devotee is always, but we want to do it in such a way that is free from reaction. Otherwise, we don't do it out of sentimentality. we do it out of Krishna consciousness. That's the point. Of course, we want to help people. We can even help an elderly lady across the road. But when we do it, we'll say, Hare Krishna, can I help you? There's nothing wrong with helping people. Even one time, Srila Prabhupada, he was walking in Juhu on the beach, and some young boys came up, and Prabhupada told the devotees, give them some, you're very poor urchins. And Prabhupada said, give them some clothes. Devotees were a little shocked. They were thinking, why? We don't give mundane charity. But Prabhupada said, if we do this, they will always remember the devotees all their life. So Prabhupada even took charity to that point, just like we have Dhanavari Mataji. That means very, very the most expert in giving dana. No, so we want to give the dana of Krishna consciousness, even if it means just interacting with people and letting them know we're devotees and we're doing something nice, and they appreciate that. And that appreciation becomes Krishna consciousness, and it becomes free from reaction.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We have a question on YouTube.
Okay.
There is someone who says, how do we pick up on chanting after being digressed for a while?
After what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. Could you repeat the last question?
How do we pick up the, sorry.
So the question is, how do we pick up on chanting after been digressed for a while? So yeah.
Otherwise, if one has been negligent, how do we pick it up again?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's always, that's one of the favorite positions that the mind wants to put us into. Why do you want to do it again? You already, you were so enthusiastic in the first place, and you gave it up. So why should you try again? So that's what we'll be up against. So how do we do it? Dridha brata, being determined. And how do we get that determination? By hearing more and more of the glories of Krishna and his holy name. Otherwise, why do we want to meet anyone, any person? Because there's something interesting about that person. Just like a young man or a young girl will see the opposite sex. Oh, he or she is very beautiful. Or this person is very strong. Or this person is very intelligent. So the more we hear about them, the more we become attracted to associating with them. And so the more we hear about the glories of the holy name, the more we become attracted to hearing about the holy name. So that determination to do so comes from hearing, comes from understanding the glories. And that's the 10th offense against the holy name. Once we understand those glories, and we continue to acquire or to fuel our material desires, then that negligence against the holy name becomes an offense, which also can contribute to the difficulty in taking it up again. But because Krishna wants us to be his devotee, and as it was said in the first question, we take advantage of our friendship with the devotees, of the association with the devotees, with kirtan. Kirtan is a very wonderful way, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said kirtan is more powerful than japa, because you're in one sense you're riding, you have your own strength, and you're riding on the strength of others, so many others who are chanting at the same time. So I would suggest that go to as much kirtan as possible, hearing about the glories of the holy name, and understanding that this is Kali Kalaradam Krishna Nam Sankirtan. That the dharma of this age is the chanting of the holy name, the most important thing. We shouldn't put it in a secondary position. So, anyone else? Otherwise,
All right. Well, thank you very much, Maharaj,
Thank
for
you.
giving class.
Thank you all very much for engaging me and allowing me this opportunity to serve you. I hope that what I said made some sense and that it contributes in some way to everyone's ongoing Krishna consciousness, mostly my own.
Yes, thank you. It's very, very enlivening and inspiring. Thank you.
Haribol. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Samasta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Nitai
Jai.
Gaur Nandi.
Hare Hare
Very
Bol.
good.